Okay, so we'll begin. Tonight is the last lecture of the series about prayer, but it will also include a little bit of a talk on the synagogues, the place of prayer. We've discussed the first part of the tefillah, beginning with the morning prayers up until the Amidah, which was the central part or the more important part of the tefillah of the prayer. Now we're going towards the end. We're about to finish the tefillah, whether it's on the morning, whether it's in the afternoon in mincha. Some of this relates to the afternoon prayer too, or whether this is on Shabbat. There's several parts of this prayer that applies also on Shabbat. What you will find in common with just about every prayer is the Kaddish. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview about what the Kaddish is, since the Kaddish is a very important part of the daily tefillah, but it also appears at other times as well. Even if there is no tefillah, even if there's no prayer being said, Kaddish is a very important prayer per se, and it is said at different occasions. So just to become familiar with Kaddish, the word Kaddish means to sanctify. We're sanctifying God's name, that He should be elevated and sanctified. There are 5 types. There's the Chatzi Kaddish, half Kaddish, which is the basic Kaddish. As you can see in the presentation, I wrote them, there are 5 basic types. There's the Kaddish that's called Yeheh Shelama because of the additional verse, Yeheh Shelama. And that is the Kaddish also known as Kaddish Yatom, the Kaddish that is said by orphans. There's the Kaddish Titkabel. That's the first one, is half Kaddish. Kaddish Yatom is the second one. Kaddish Titkabal or Kaddish Shalem is the whole Kaddish. It is a little bit longer. And there is Kaddish Derabanan, which is also called Kaddish Al Yisrael because of the extra verse that is said Al Yisrael. And then we have Kaddish Gadol. So I'm going to speak a little bit about each one of them and what they represent. Kaddish in general used to be said at the end of certain agadot, certain learning that the rabbis would learn. And later it was incorporated into the tefillah. In incorporating into the tefillah, it was used to divide or to separate different parts of prayer that were quite different. In order to make a division between them, they included this particular Kaddish. Even though, as you will see, there are various parts of it that relate to the future. And that is why later on it was also adopted by orphans. And I say later on because in the very beginning, Kaddish was not a prayer for orphans to say. It had nothing to do with the dead. Today we are familiar with it because it is said at a funeral, it is said by those who are in mourning, and I'm going to explain why that is so. But in the very beginning, it was a very special, very powerful prayer that was said for some reason in the Aramaic language. Now, why is it being said in the Aramaic language? And as I mentioned earlier on, certain parts of the prayer are said in Aramaic, either because that was the language of the people where this prayer was being composed in Bavel. That was the language that they spoke at one time, the Aramaic language. That's why certain parts of the prayer you will find in Aramaic, including the Kaddish. But our tradition also says that the Malachim don't understand Aramaic, or they don't relate to this language. And when we want to say a very powerful and very special prayer, and we're perhaps not worthy of our words being accepted, we will say it in a language that they can't figure out or they don't relate to, so that they shouldn't stop it. We want this prayer to go up all the way to Shamayim, to Hashem, and we don't want it to be stopped by those malachim, those angels that may accuse us of doing something wrong. And who are we to make this request? Who are we to make these very beautiful, important statements? So that's another reason why certain parts of the prayer book, including Kaddish, including Berish Shmeh, and including parts of Uval Etzion Goel at the very end of the prayer, are said in Aramaic. So Chatzi Kaddish is the simplest form of Kaddish that you will find at certain times of the prayer. This particular Kaddish ordinarily is being said by the Hazan. And I'm going to explain a little bit later on what this Chazan is all about, or as he's called by some, the Shliach Tzibur. He's the messenger of the Tzibur, of the congregation. We have Kaddish Yehei Shelama, which is Kaddish Yatom. That is the one that many of you perhaps are familiar with. That is called today the Kaddish of the orphans, because the orphans, or those who are in mourning, have begun to say. This was said in the very, very beginning as a form of tziduk hadin. When somebody very dear to us would pass away, there is a bracha that is made, Dayan Ha'emet. There's a prayer where we say that we believe and trust in Hashem, that He knows what's best, and that this is therefore correct, even though it may have been before that individual's time. He's a young man, young woman. There's something called tziduk hadin, where we accept, where we demonstrate our trust in Hashem, that we have full faith and confidence in Him, that this is correct. Not only that is this correct, but we also believe in Tchiyat HaMetim. We also believe that the dead will rise. There will come a time that they will rise. And therefore, this is a very important part of our emunah. In other words, that we do not despair, that we have belief in Hashem, that at some point, Yitgadal v'Yitkadash Shem Rabbav, when His name will be elevated and will be sanctified all over the world, which we are praying for at the same time, those who have died will also come back, will return to us, and that in itself, when they return, or as it is called, Tchiyat HaMetim, will be the biggest Kiddush Hashem. In other words, what we're asking for in this prayer is for Hashem to reveal Himself. Throughout the prayer, we have been saying words of trust. We have been making requests to this Almighty, who we believe in Him, that we know that everything comes from Him. But we are making an additional request that everybody else get to know Him, that the whole world become familiar with Him. And of course, for the orphans, to make this statement is also reminding them that the mavet, the death, zelo chidalon. It's not a vacuum. It's not where somebody just ceases to exist and has disappeared. On the contrary, the soul continues to survive on another realm, another plane, and we will see them back in Tchiyat HaMetim. Therefore, very powerful words that was later adopted by those who are in mourning, to say at certain times of the prayer, especially at the very end of the prayer. And there was some differences between Ashkenazim and Sfaradim as to whether one would say it, everybody would say it, everybody had a need. Today, just about everybody says it who needs to say it. If there's no man in the family that can say it, then the family appoints somebody to say it. Why is it so important that the family should appoint someone? I mean, after all it is a custom in a sense. I call it a custom because it's not really clearly stated in the Gemara that this is something that needs to be said. We know how important it is to pray, but the Kaddish and to be adopted by mourners. But it came about as a result, one of the ideas of how this came about is as a result of a story or two in the Midrash of Rabbi Yochanan, or I believe it could have been at Rabbi Akiva, was once walking in the field, and he saw a very strange sight. There was this man who was charcoal, dark, black as charcoal. And he was collecting wood, and he was running with such speed that the rabbi knew that this is not a normal human being. Either he's a demon or something out of this world. In other words, what he was seeing before him was a sight out of this world. He was going back and forth getting wood. So he approached him. What are you doing? Getting all this wood, going back from getting more wood? I go collect wood every single day so they can burn me. Burn me? Yes. You see, I'm not longer amongst the living, he says. He basically says he has died already a couple years ago. But because he was a wicked man, because he did not fulfill any of the mitzvot of the Torah, because of what he did, some terrible sins, this was his punishment, that every day he would collect his own wood, and they would the angels would burn him up. Now, obviously, he's not a physical human being that he's being burned, and the wood here is not exactly physical, but the sight that was beheld by this rabbi basically was to impress upon him, well, look, what is happening to the neshama of this individual in the upper worlds. Obviously, min hashamayim, they allowed this rabbi to see it, and you will see why soon. So the rabbi asked him, wait a minute, you have such a harsh punishment. Is there anything that you ever did in your life that can be to your merit? He says, I have no merits whatsoever. Did you leave behind any children? He says, yes, I left behind one child, and he's just as bad as me. In other words, he's not doing anything. He says, but Rabbi, if somehow this child can get to do the right thing, that will be a tremendous menucha. That would give me ultimate peace. The rabbi understood what he needed to do. And he went and he taught this child from A to Z. In other words, as much as the guy didn't know anything. The young man didn't know nothing, not even Aleph Bet. He started teaching him the Aleph Bet, little by little, the Tefillah, the prayer book. And when this child came to the Bet HaKnesset, and I think it was at the age of Bar Mitzvah, and said, Baruchu et Hashem Amvorach, they released his father from Gehenom. How did he know, the rabbi, that in fact has happened? Because it came to him in a dream. And he already looked completely different. He says, thank you for what you've done. As soon as my child was able to say the few words, as soon as he was able to compose his own blessing, as soon as he on his own said, Baruch Hu Hashem Vorach, they took me out of the Gehenom. Tremendous lesson over here that, of course, is obvious, is that one's child, one's son, one's daughter, are his emissaries in this world. They are the continuation of the father or mother who have departed. There still is somebody here. If there is, those children can continue to give some merit to their parents. Some. They can no longer do for the parents what the parent could have done for himself, but something, whether it's learning in their memory, whether it's giving charity in their memory, any good deeds does count. It makes them proud, it makes them happy, and it definitely helps them, if they need that help, to get them out of trouble, as we saw from this story. So as a result of this story and additional other incidents, the rabbis realized the importance of saying this particular prayer that contains in it very powerful ideas of tziduk hadin. Again, tziduk hadin meaning when the child says, I agree, I understand, I accept what Hashem has done, even though we don't fully understand it, but I accept it. That's tziduk hadin, accepting the judgment here. And in saying those words, he's basically also saying that he believes that there will come a day that Hashem's name will be exalted all over the world, and they will be also followed by Tchiyat HaMetim. There's various nuschaot, various versions of the Kaddish itself, of the various Kaddishim. Some of the Kaddishim even add words about Mashiach. We're talking about the coming of the Mashiach and coming very, very soon. So there is a tremendous emphasis, therefore, on the future, that we're looking forward to this day. Not only for the dead to rise, but obviously for Hashem's name to become exalted. So a very important prayer that is said at various points of the Shachrit or of Mincha and Arvit, but different kinds of Kaddishim. So we've spoken so far about the Chatzi Kaddish, which is the basic one. And then we mentioned that the importance of the Kaddish Yeshlama, which is the Kaddish Yatom. And then comes Kaddish Titkabal. This one is only said at the very, very end of the prayer, after Uval Etzion, but depending which prayer it is. And that is like a finishing Kaddish. A finishing Kaddish where we're saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please accept the prayers of all our Jewish brethren. Not just mine. Here we're including Titkabal, in other words, receive, accept the prayers of everyone who tuned to you. And of course, we ask that there should be peace for all of Am Yisrael, that there should be Chaim Tovim, good life for all of Am Yisrael. So this is a general prayer, a general Kaddish, that we include everyone. Then we have Kaddish de Rabbanan, which is called also Kaddish al Israel, which is usually said after having learned something. And that is where we pray for the Chachamim. That is where we pray for the Talmidei Chachamim, for the students of the Chachamim. That is where we pray for all those who study the Torah. A special Kaddish after having said something in learning. That's called Kaddish de Rabbanan, of the rabbis, or Al Yisrael, because of the words that we add, Al Yisrael. Then we have the Kaddish Gadol, which is rarely said, and that is a Kaddish that is said after one completes a Masechet, a tractate of Gemara. It's a very long version of Kaddish, many more words, talking about the future. That's right. Beautiful Kaddish as well, but it's only said in certain situations. Now the Temanim, actually, the Yemenite tradition, have a Kaddish Gadol in other occasions as well. Their Kaddish, the Rabbanan in a sense, is a Kaddish Gadol. So theirs is a little bit different. But this Kaddish Gadol is only said at times where we finish a Masechet. Even though the Sephardim do have another modification of another Kaddish called Te'anu v'Te'ateru min Hashamayim that they say during the time of Selichot, which is also a very long Kaddish, but that's a different Kaddish at time of Selichot.
So Titkabel is not just limited to the Kahal, it's actually all of Am Yisrael?
Yeah, for everybody's tefillah, exactly. Now the main part of the Kaddish is the words Yehei Shmei Rabbah. That is the most important part of the Kaddish. And the rabbis tell us whoever says that B'kol Ram, whoever says that with the proper kavanah, in other words, he understands what he's saying, he means what he's saying it, he says it out loud, he's able to cancel out all the most terrible decrees against him. So whoever gets used to saying Yehei Shmei Rabbah properly, tremendous. I can assure you, this is something that obviously you can't misbehave and then just do this. But say Yehei Shmei Rabbah with proper kavanah, tremendous. Our tradition reminds us that this is a very powerful clause. And actually the most important part of the Kaddish. Even though we begin with Yitkadav Kadash, by asking Hashem, let everybody get to know you, let your name become exalted all over the world. Right? We want to live to see it too. Yehei Shmei Rabbah, we're saying that his name should be blessed forever. So that is the main part of the Kaddish, and obviously that is the part we answer, one of the parts we answer besides the Amenim when we hear the Kaddish. Okay, so after having discussed a little bit the Kaddish, I'm just going to remind you that there are some customs with the orphan Kaddish, that we said how important it is for the orphans, and that is that it is said at various times, including the first 11 months after the Niftar has left this world. In other words, we have a tradition that the Rasha, those who did not do a good job in performance of the mitzvot, may be up to 11 months in Gehenom, which is where they receive their cleansing of the sins. So we say Kaddish in order to elevate their neshama, in order that they should have additional zechuyot. So the Kaddish being said for them at different times is to give them some zechut, some merit. As we said earlier on, there's some things that we can do for them. So the saying of the Kaddish is important for Ilui LaNeshama and for additional zechuyot, for additional merits that they can have. Yeah, there's different customs between Sephardim and Ashkenazim. There's the day of the Yortzeit that Ashkenazim say the Kaddish the night before and the day. And by Sephardim, depending on your custom, they start the week before with the Arvit of Leil Shabbat or Friday night. So then there's different customs how to or when to say the Kaddish when the Yortzeit, the anniversary of the death, returns on a regular basis. No. Later on, they just say it on that one day. Right, that's it. Now, obviously, you can say Kaddish all the time. You can say it for others too. You know, if somebody's already saying Kaddish, you can have in mind others too. It is a very important prayer that is zechut, some zechut, some merit for the niftar. Yeah. Well, obviously, when one has completed a passage of learning, then you say the Kaddish de Rabbanan, which can also be said by the mourner. Because as I said earlier, the Chatzi Kaddish or the Kaddish Titkabal actually are said usually by the Chazanim or by the Shliach Tzibur, whoever is standing there. But the Kaddish de Rabbanan, at times, of course, is being said by the Yatom, by the one who's in mourning, or one who can say that Kaddish. According to the Kabbalah, Kaddish has a different idea, and that is we're elevating not only Hashem's name, we're elevating the tefillot. The tefillot are becoming elevated step by step, going through the various stages, and as we're completing the tefillah, we're entering the highest stage of all. So, according to the Kabbalah, there's other ideas behind this prayer too. Either way, it is very important to have the proper kavanah when one says it, and to answer to it if others are saying it. Okay, we're going to briefly go through the end of the tefillah, and then, as I promised earlier, we're going to go through a different area completely. So it's going to be a little bit of a surprise to you. But let's just finish up with the prayer. We have, after the Tfilat Amidah that I explained was the most important part of the prayer, whether it's Shachrit, Mincha, or Arvit, Tfilat Amidah, the Shmoneh, which includes our personal requests as well, we begin with Tachanun. Tachanun is a very interesting prayer. Most people have no idea what they're doing with Tachanun. Now, if you go to an Ashkenaz shul, you will see something strange. You will see the Ashkenazi Jew putting his head down on his left arm or on his right arm, depending if it's the morning or the afternoon. Because he has his tefillin on his left, and not everybody puts his head down on the hand they have the tefillin on. Okay? After the Amidah, he begins to say Tachanun by putting his head down. Most Sephardim, not all, but most Sephardim don't do that. Okay? Now, what is the idea here? The beginning of the prayer and the middle of the prayer, you will notice that certain parts that we say sitting down, other parts that we say standing up, right? Here comes a prayer that it's neither sitting and neither standing. It's completely on the floor. Ishtachavaya. The real Tachanun is called Nefilat Apayim. Nefilat Apayim, where we're completely on the floor, completely face down on the floor. And except for Yom Kippur, you rarely see that kind of posture of somebody just. And there's different reasons why we don't do that today. We don't have the Bet HaMikdash. We're not supposed to really do that just anywhere. There's various reasons why we don't, and I don't want to get into all the reasons why we don't do that today. There's various explanations why we don't do the full Ishtachavaya, which is what it's supposed to be, Nefilat Apayim, where we are completely mitbatlim. In other words, what do we mean mitbatlim? What we're saying to Hashem after we made all these requests and we said all those beautiful prayers, hopefully with kavanah, we're saying, you know what, Hashem, and we're not tzaddikim, we're definitely not righteous, we've committed all sorts of mistakes. Please accept our prayers at least, berachamecha, harabim. Please accept our prayers just out of your compassion for us. So this prayer is a prayer of complete hitbatlut. Hitbatlut means that we nullify ourselves. In other words, we see how we're nothing and how we perhaps don't even deserve all that we have just said. We've made all these requests. So right after we made all these requests, we're approaching Hashem in a completely different posture of putting our head down, and that putting that head down according to the Ashkenaz is instead of bowing down completely on their face. So it's a form of humbleness, of feeling sorry for ourselves and asking Hashem in this manner, not standing up, not sitting down, but in a form of hachna'ah and itbatlut. Please, consider our situation. That's what Tachanun is. Now, in Tachanun, you also have a longer Tachanun and you have a shorter Tachanun, and you have an average Tachanun. The average Tachanun is what certain congregations have, and that is on top of the regular Techinot, which is Tachanun, is on top of the regular asking for forgiveness. There's Shloshes Midot. Shloshes Midot, the 13 attributes of Hashem, where the Sephardim add, and that was introduced when the Kabbalah became very, very popular. So we have the Shloshes Midot being added to certain congregations, Nusach Sfarad and the Sfaradim, but not Nusach Ashkenaz, not on a regular basis. You don't have all the 13 Midot. But you have more prayers, a more intense prayer of asking for forgiveness to Hashem. But on Mondays and Thursdays, we have a longer Tachanun, right? What's Monday and Thursday? Traditionally, Mondays and Thursdays are Yemei Ratzon. They are very special days for asking for forgiveness. These are days that Hashem somehow is prepared to listen even more if we beg Him. In other words, if we approach Him properly. These are the days of Ratzon, because Moshe Rabbeinu went up on Thursday and came down on Monday. So because of that, these are called Yemei Ratzon, propitious days, days where Hashem listens to our prayers even more than on a regular day. It's more charged, and therefore you will see it's much longer. All of these Techinot and Bakashot, some differences between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim, because these prayers are already being added on later on when the Jews are being scattered all over the diaspora. Years ago, but it's already in the diaspora that is being added. And so therefore there's slightly differences in the order of what is said and how much is said, but the words are very similar. Additional requests for Hashem, but this time more involving forgiveness. Now these Tachinot or Bakashot are not said on certain days. Anybody know which days? Tachanun, we don't say Tachanun. Days of happiness, of holidays, right? Or there's a Brit Milah, right? Why not? Because the whole Tachanun expresses Shivron Lev. It's an expression of the heart breaking. It is an expression of the individual completely letting go of anything. In other words, on his mind right now, and only focusing on Hashem's forgiveness. So no more requests, no more nothing else that was said till now. So therefore, you don't want to spoil the mood on a holiday, on a time of happiness, in introducing this kind of tefillah. So the rabbi said during those days or those occasions, festive occasions, no tachanun is said. All right, let's go on to the next one. We have Ashrei. Ashrei Yoshvei V'techa, but wait a minute, we already did Ashrei Yoshvei V'techa. We spoke about Ashrei Yoshvei V'techa, we spoke how special it is, how it is according to the Aleph Bet, how there's a very special Segula, Poteach et Yadecha, for Parnasa. That particular pasuk is very, very powerful as a Segula, as a very intense prayer to ask Hashem for Parnasa. So what is it doing here again at the end of the Tefillah? So the rabbis tell us, how many times do we say Ashrei Yoshvei V'techa during the day? 3 times. Whoever says it 3 times, he's guaranteed to have Chelek L'Olam Haba, that he has a share to the world to come. Where do we have it 3 times? Twice in Shachrit and once in Mincha. So whoever says Ashrei Yoshvei V'techa properly 3 times a day, he has the right kavanah, he has Olam Haba. Wow. And it's hard to understand. You try to figure out what's in Ashrei Yoshvei V'techa that has to do with the world to come, that you're guaranteed. Well, obviously you have to do other things too, but this is very important to guarantee your Olam Haba. So I saw in the name of Rav Kook, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the old Rav Kook, that said, he has a beautiful commentary on the Tefillah, that in Ashrei Yoshvei V'techa you have a tremendous emphasis on bitachon b'Hashem, on reliance in Hashem. When do we need this reliance in Hashem more than anything else? When you have so many things that are interfering in our life, matridim otanu, madigim otanu, they make us worry, concerns. And all these worries and concerns, what do? They interfere with our service with God. They don't let us concentrate. Oh, we have to pay this bill. Oh, we got to do this thing. Oh, we don't even have time to think about our purpose in life and our mission. What are we doing here? We're worried about all these other things. So in the Ashrei Yoshvei V'techa, we're asking Hashem, please allow us to focus on the real things and enable us to have the proper bitachon in you, the proper confidence and faith in you, because if we have the faith, the proper faith in you, we will not have any worries. And if we will not have any worries, we will end up doing the right thing. And if we end up doing the right thing, then we have a Chelek L'Olam Haba. That's one idea. The second idea is that we're asking Hashem to enlighten us, that we should have clarity of the mind to be able to know Him, to be able to understand what He wants of us. Not everybody understands, what does God want of me? So in that prayer, if you follow the words properly, we're asking for that enlightenment. We're asking to have the proper confidence and trust in Hashem so that we should not have to have any worries and therefore be able to be immersed in the right thing. And what is that right thing? The service of Hashem. And if you do so, you're going to be immersed in the right things, not waste your time, be focused on what you're supposed to be focused, then of course, B'ezrat Hashem, you will have a Chelek L'Olam Haba. What comes after Asher Uva L'Tzion? Uva L'Tzion is also a very interesting prayer. Uva L'Tzion is already the last, it is considered the last major part of the prayer, even though we have a few more. Shir Shel Yom, Pitum Haktoret. Uva L'Tzion is really, you're not supposed to take off your tefillin before Uva L'Tzion, unless you're in a rush or something. You're supposed to wait till it, because this is the last major part of the prayer. And what happens in Uva L'Tzion? Now, Uva L'Tzion has various parts to it. It's called Kedusha de Sidra, very important Kedusha. We have Kedusha various times during the prayer where we sanctify Hashem's name. But here it is interspersed with portions of learning Torah that we translate into Aramaic. We say it and we translate. The rabbis were concerned that people may not have enough time to learn Torah during the day. Let them have at least a little bit of a taste, a little bit of Torah. And that's what this Uva L'Tzion contains. Portions of learning of the Torah, plus several Pesukim that were added at different times in our history because of trouble that we have with the Goyim. Trouble that we have with the Goyim, that they didn't want to catch us saying the Kedusha of the Amidah. Remember there was a Kedusha, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh in Amidah? Oy vavoy if they were to catch a Jew doing something that was not, in their eyes, something very good. So therefore, we had to sneak away and recreate this Kedusha in Uva L'Tzion when they would not expect us to say it. So there was different problems throughout the history of the Jewish people, especially in those days. As you will see with Aleinu L'Shabach soon, we had trouble. The Goyim would sometimes come and spy on us. What are they saying? Saying something against us? So we would have to be very, very quiet about certain things. And we added in the Uva L'Tzion Goel, that is a beautiful pasuk that he said at the beginning of this prayer that has nothing to do with the Kedusha, but it is a reminder to us that we're looking forward, Uva L'Tzion Goel, for Mashiach to come. These are times that the Jews are being persecuted, perhaps very, very much. So this is a way to give them the encouragement to not lose any hope that Uva L'Tzion Goel, Urshaveh Fesha B'Yaakov. So this prayer, as you can see, is being added later on, even though we've prayed so much till now, but with this additional requests to emphasize certain ideas that perhaps were de-emphasized before for whatever reason, now they're being emphasized again. So here we have the Kiddushat Hashem, the sanctification of Hashem's name, plus the learning of the Torah. And by saying the little bit that we're saying, this would be considered at least a little bit of Limud Torah, of the learning of the Torah. Okay, then we have Shir Shel Yom. Shir Shel Yom is the song that we say every day, that the Leviim used to say. So this corresponds to Ayom Yom Sheni B'Shabbat, Shlishi B'Shabbat, Revi'i B'Shabbat, the songs that the Leviim would say. As I've said all along, that a great deal of the prayer is connected to the service of the Bet HaMikdash that we don't have today. So here we are reminding ourselves of what the Leviim used to do, the singing, the special praise that they said on a regular basis every single day. Pitum Haktoret. Pitum Haktoret, powerful stuff. Pitum Haktoret is so powerful that you may occasionally see somebody saying it from a scroll. Somebody might be saying the Pitum Haktoret from a piece of parchment that was written by a sofer. Just, it would look like a big mezuzah. And you ask yourself, what's going on over here? All of a sudden you see him taking out of his tefillin bag a little scroll with the Pitum Haktoret. What's this Pitum Haktoret? Even though it has been said earlier too. Now, not everybody says this exact nusach of Pitum Haktoret at the very end of the tefillah. There's some differences between the congregations, the communities. Nevertheless, Pitum Haktoret is powerful because if one says it properly, it has two very important segulot. You know what a segula is? Segula is a metaphysical, powerful prayer that can help us in certain specific areas. This Pitum Haktoret can help stop a magefa, a plague. We learned it out from the Torah with Aaron. He was able to stop the plague that was decimating many, many Jews. And in the past, in Europe and other countries, when there would be a danger of a plague, the rabbis would come out and say the Ktoret. The Ktoret was powerful, to stop plagues somehow. And the Ktoret is also Segula for Parnasa. Very powerful Segula for Parnasa. Whoever was involved in the Ktoret, in the Bet HaMikdash, rabbis tell us, became wealthy. So not everybody got more than once a chance in his lifetime. They wanted to give this to everybody, a chance to be involved in the Ktoret. Something that was done on a daily basis in the Bet HaMikdash, and because this was also done in the Bet HaMikdash, the Kohen, of course, getting involved with this, so we introduce it again at the end of the Tefillah, but not just because it was said not only because it was done in the Bet HaMikdash, but also because of the powerful segulot that it has. So therefore, the reason I said some people write it down, have a sofer write it on a piece of parchment, is because that's how it is brought down in the name of one of the rabbis to do so, because it's so special, it's so holy, that if it is said with the proper kavanah, it actually can accomplish those segulot. So they would write it, some people would write it on a parchment and read it from the parchment. This portion of the prayer has kit'ei limud, it has parts of learning, it has a braita. In other words, there are certain halachot, or certain things that are being said that also deal with learning. So that is why we will have what Kaddish afterwards. Yitzchak, what Kaddish we're going to be having after this one? After Pitum HaKtoret? We're going to have the Kaddish of Al Yisrael. Why? Because there are portions of learning that are being said here besides the Ktoret. The Ktoret are the 11 samamanim, the 11 special ingredients that mixed with other things as well and prepared in a certain way were very, very powerful in driving away witchcraft, in driving away all kinds of ills that existed back then. And even though today we don't have it, our tradition is that whoever says it, it is as though he's like performing it. So that is why it is mentioned here at the end of the Tefillah. Before we go to Aleinu L'Shabeach, just quickly, we do have at times Hallel, like today, Rosh Chodesh. There is Hallel that's being said during special days, like the beginning of the month, like during the holidays. Hallel was said very differently in the past. It used to be that the Chazan would read one portion and the congregation would answer. It is said a little bit differently amongst Sephardim and Ashkenazim today, but either way, depending on what's the occasion, either the whole Hallel is said or half Hallel. These are all parts of Tehillim, very, very concentrated praises to Hashem, especially during times of holidays where we are very happy and we rejoice with Hashem. And as a result of all that rejoicing, there's an additional prayer to rejoice with Hashem. All these words of praise to Hashem. That's what Hallel. Hallel means to praise Hashem. So we add them because this is not a regular day, not an ordinary day. So we add something different, and that is what the Chachamim put together that should be said during these special occasions. And finally, we end up with Aleinu L'Shabeach. There is differences of opinion as to who put together this prayer. Some say it even comes from the time of Yoshua bin Nun, that at least the first part of Aleinu L'Shabeach was composed by him, and some say the second part of Aleinu L'Shabeach, Balkene Kavelach, was composed by this person named Achan. All right. Either way, some say that the Tanaim, Amoraim, are the ones who put together Aleinu L'Shabeach. But what's interesting about Aleinu L'Shabeach, remember, this is for the most part the very, very, very end of the Tefillah. Now, there are some differences between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim as to the order of things, but for the most part, this is the last prayer of all. Aleinu L'Shabeach, in thanking Hashem for everything that He has done, right? That He has created everything, that we're different than the rest of the nations. And how are we different? That we're so lucky. We are able to turn to Him, the only Him in the world, and He grants our requests. And when everybody else, mishtachavim lahevel varik, umitpalelim le'el lo yoshia, and everybody else in the world is turning to nonsense, to gods that don't help and don't exist. And guess who was very, very upset when they heard that? Especially when some Jews have the custom of spitting when they say lahevel varik. Now, don't misunderstand it when they spit. Some people still have the custom. You might once be in a shul, and I'm not going to say which shul now, and all of a sudden you're going to see somebody say lahevel varik, and he's going to spit on the floor. And you're going to say, excuse me, who do you think you are? But that's the custom. That's the custom of some communities, and it used to be various communities who used to do that, right? But I'm not going to get into explaining the explanation right now. Well, it depends how much accumulated in your mouth. Yeah.
Everybody does it. It could be relative
Yeah.
to
If everybody
Yeah.
does it, we're going to have to create jobs.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is that the non-Jewish world, the Catholics didn't like it because they knew very well that we had them in mind when we were saying La Hevel Varik to all these gods that don't help, right? And then we turn back and we say that we hope and look forward, right? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu yeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad, that He will be one and His name one. So that is a very beautiful prayer at the very, very end, where we look back at all that we have said right now, and we say to ourselves how lucky we are, how different we are. Look at everybody else. I like to say it a little bit different. Whenever I'm here at night, I say to myself, it's not a prayer, but I think to myself, look at these guys out there. They're standing on line, where? At Pink's, to buy a hot dog. Then you have another group who's standing on some other line, waiting to watch this silly movie, right? Then you have some other lines of all these people who are sitting down and playing cards. And look where I am. I'm here learning the Torah, praying to Hashem. What a different lifestyle for a Jew. So the Jew is reminded at the very, very end of the prayer that listen, you know what you have done? You've just spoken to God, right? You've just communicated with Him, and this is exactly what He wants of you, to maintain a very, very special connection with you, a connection that none of the rest of the world has. This pretty much concludes the part of the prayer. However, as I said earlier, we're going to right now go for the next few minutes into another part that is related to the prayer. First of all, we're going to go into the various aspects or details or portions or parts, however you want to call it, of the shul itself. What do you find in the shul? We've been speaking so much about prayer now, so I'm going to be showing you all kinds of shuls, and I'm going to show you all that goes into making a shul. And what do you find in a shul? So first thing, you find today something you didn't have in the past. You find a Hazan. A Hazan, or as he's called by Ashkenazim, a Shliach Tzibur. He's the messenger of the Tzibur. The Tzibur does not always know how to pray, how to communicate. Remember, we spoke about Chazara, the repetition, the review of the Tfilat HaAmidah of the Shmoneh Esrei is being reviewed by somebody who represents us, who can speak for us, who hopefully understands what he's saying. Not anybody can be a Chazan. So this Chazan today, not always in the past, but in the last, I guess, a little over 1,000 years, of course, has been representing the congregation in certain parts of the prayer and saying it out loud, involving everyone in the blessings. Very important part of the Bet HaKnesset. We have a Baal Koreh, similar to Hazan. He's the one that reads from the Torah, because unless you're in a Yemenite shul, you will not find a Baal Koreh there. Why? Because most Temanim, I would venture to say even 99%, even if they're secular today, they know how to read from the Torah. They go up, and you see them, what? He's going to read? Yeah, he knows how to read, and he won't make a mistake. Because from the age of 7 or from before that, he was taught, and he will remember it for the rest of his life. So they don't need a Baal Koreh, somebody to read. Why do we have a Baal Koreh, one who reads for us the Torah? Because most people don't know how to read or do not prepare. They don't know how to sing it properly or say it properly or pronounce it right. So they need to have somebody read it for them. And by the way, when you are getting an aliyah, and you go up and get your aliyah and you say the blessings, you're supposed to really read quietly along with the Baal Koreh, so that you should be included in the reading. The Yemenites also do the Tarjum, which is the Aramaic translation, right? Yeah. So anyway, that is the Baal Koreh's job, is to read the Torah or to read the Megillat Esther, whatever it is that he's going to be reading for the whole congregation. Then we have a Gabai. Gabai is an individual who helps out, gives out aliyot. You may have heard of him, Gabayim. Not every shul has one. In some shuls, everybody wants to be one, right? Yeah, the president, yeah. But anyway, he helps out. Then we're going to soon see, I'm going to show you some incredible pictures of what an Aron Kodesh is supposed to look like. The Aron Kodesh, of course, where the Sifrei Torah are in. The Hechal, as it is called by Sfaradim. Sfaradim call it usually Hechal. Ashkenazim usually call it Aron HaKodesh, the Aron, the Aron, the Ark, because that is where the Sifrei Torah are, and that is where the Luchot HaBrit used to be, in the Aron. So even though in the very beginning of times we didn't have an Aron HaKodesh, there was barely any Bet Knesset. People got together, the Sefer Torah was in another room. They would bring it out later on and bring it into the shul. Eventually this developed, this evolved, I should say, where they kept it permanently there in a box, in a safe, in an area usually facing Yerushalayim. So this is similar to the Aron that we had, the ark that we had, with the Luchot HaBrit, with the tablets. So it's called Hechal or Aron HaKodesh. Then we have the Bima. Bima, as it is called by the Ashkenazim, by this farm they call it the Teva, like a box. That is where the Chazan stands. Now what's the difference between the Chazan of the Ashkenazim and the Chazan of Sfaradim? The Chazan of the Ashkenazim usually stands by something called Amud, as you can see. I wrote the word Amud. Amud is like a lectern, and it's usually at the front of the Bet HaKnesset. And if the shul was built according to tradition, that part was lower than the rest of the shul too. Not every place they did it like that, but at least he prayed over there. By Sfaradim, you don't see that. Most Sephardic communities, the Chazan will pray in the middle of the Bet HaKnesset by the Teva. Now by Ashkenazim too, the Chazan will remain by the Teva because that is where they read the Sefer Torah. So he remains there. Yeah. Yeah. Now by Ashkenazim, the Chazan usually starts and many times finishes where he started. By Sephardim, he actually may start from his seat, saying portions of the prayer until the time comes for him to go to the Teva. And as you will soon see, the Bet HaKnesset in many places looks different. Even though in the very beginning there was no standard Bet HaKnesset, it was after the destruction of the temple that we're having this shul, the synagogue being formed. You will see so many styles. I'm about to show you incredible pictures, architecture, styles, and different types of shuls. But either way, it's all the same thing. Regardless, the main thing is that one pray and know what he's saying. All these little details is just as a result of the diaspora, as a result of people being exposed to different styles and adopting those styles into the shul as well. In the shul, we have a Sefer Torah, of course, as well, besides prayer books. And we have the Amud that I spoke about, which for the most part Ashkenazim have, where the Chazan prays from. It is important to have a minyan. Certain parts of the prayer can only be said with a minyan, which is a group of 10 adult male Jews. And we learn it from the Pasuk, V'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael. The Kedusha, the sanctification of Hashem's name, has to be with a congregation, which is the minimum of 10 people. And this is important for Kaddish. It is important for the reading of the Torah. It is important for Birkat Kohanim. It is important for the Kedusha of the Amidah. It is especially important in certain parts of the prayer where it has to be 10. It has something to do with Kedusha, and Kedusha has to be with 10. So that is why we are very, very careful to have 10 or more. Now, also the tradition says that the Shekhinah resides if there is 10 Jews. If there's a minimum of 10 Jews in the shul, then the Shekhinah is there too. Shekhinah being there means that the prayers are more effective. And that is why no comparison whatsoever for somebody to pray at home and somebody to pray in a shul. Even if you have no kavanah, you don't have the proper kavanah, means concentration and focus, but you prayed with a shul, in a shul, which is a holy place, and with a minyan, 10 people, that is much better than you praying by yourself at home. Because if you pray by yourself at home, you can, if you don't feel well, but you have to have so much more kavanah for it to be equal to your prayer in the shul. So there's no comparison whatsoever. So a minyan is a very powerful way of getting Jews together to pray to Hashem, but it's not just powerful, that's the only way certain things can be said or done. Without it, you can't do it. And last but not least, of course, let's not forget that this Bet HaKnesset, or any Bet Midrash, a place where they learn and pray or pray, has Kedusha. The place is holy. You can't just sell it to a church or to anything else. It's not such a simple matter to just sell a shul. You know, in Spain, it's incredible. I was there. They show you in Toledo, a place that was a shul, went to becoming a mosque, then to become a church, and eventually came back to being a shul, and then to becoming a museum. In other words, you can see, and you can see the stages. You can even see where the Hechal, where the Aron HaKodesh was originally. I mean, there's no Sefer Torah, but you can see the various stages in history of who took it over and what happened to it. But that was by force. Otherwise, you know, you don't just give it over to anybody. It is a very holy place. You're not supposed to talk business in this shul or any shul. People have to be very careful during the time of prayer not to just talk. And even to learn, you don't just learn at any time of the prayer. You have to concentrate and listen to the blessings and answer amen and participate. It is not a place to just eat unless it's a seudat mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to eat. It's a brit milah and things like that. It is a place where one really has to be careful, because if one does not treat it right, then how could they accept his prayers, you know? Look how you're treating this place, right? So kedusha of the place is something that we always have to have in mind when we enter. Even if we don't pray there at that moment, at that time, it is still holy. So what we're going to do now is take a look at all these items that I just mentioned, some of these items, and how they appear. First, I want to tell you a little bit about the old synagogues. They've actually done a lot of archaeology work in Israel over the years. They've found old synagogues, including one in Masada. Masada, as you know, these were Jews who were running away, according to at least the story that we're told, from the Romans, trying to find a place for themselves to hide, to be far, where they can practice Judaism openly. And a Jew, of course, wherever he goes, builds a mikveh, number one, builds a shul, number two. This was important to them. They didn't know how long they were going to be here. And therefore, here you see the remnants of the old shul. You see madregot here. This shul is being built with steps where the people would sit. There are no chairs, and one was more elevated and higher than the other. You have another shul that's found in Katzrin, all the way in the north. Also remnants. How do they know that this is a shul? They were able to tell the configuration of the shuls, even back then, had certain things in common. That they knew that this is where the Sefer Torah was. This is where the people sat around. This was not a theater. Some of them have even a mikveh, a ritual bath. One of the most famous shuls in Israel is called the Churba synagogue of Yehuda Hasid. This is an old picture before the Arabs destroyed most of it in 1948. Over the years, this place was destroyed and remodeled, and now they're almost, I think they're just about completed now, the remodeling. If you go today to the old city, you will see a dome. It's different than this dome. The dome is not there, the original dome, but this is a picture of the old city, of what it looked like back then, years ago, the old homes. And that was a very famous shul. And the whole story behind how it was founded. Some say that the foundations of that location were used as a shul or as a meeting place even back at the time of the first and second temple era, and later on too. This is in the old city, one of the most famous synagogues of the old city, and perhaps one of the most famous synagogues in Israel. The Churba. It's called the Churba. Churba meaning destroyed. Anyway, for those of you who do not know too much American history, the first Jews to come to this country, you know where they came from? They came from Brazil. I said, Brazil? Yeah. In this part of the world, North and South America, the first Jews were in South America, in the city of Recife, in Brazil, in northern Brazil. They came from after the Portuguese Inquisition. There was a Spanish and there was a Portuguese Inquisition. This was controlled by the Portuguese, remember. But the Dutch also had a little bit of an influence over there. And when the Dutch were fighting the Portuguese at a certain time, and the Portuguese were giving the Jews a hard time there too, so some Jews decided, let's get out of here. And some of them went to the islands nearby, to Curaçao, to Barbados, and some went to a place called New Amsterdam. You know where New Amsterdam is? New York. And now this is in the 1600s, in the early 1600s. So the first congregation is not a building, okay? Congregation means a shul. The first congregation in the United States was in New York, and I'm going to show you a picture of that in a moment, but this is not it. What you're seeing now is a picture of the actual first synagogue, not first congregation of people that met to pray, but the first synagogue called Torah Synagogue by the man who donated the place. And this is in the early time of the American colonies. As the United States is becoming free from England, there are many Jews there already. There are several 100,000 Jews in the 19th century. Do you know that there were even Jews on the Confederate side and Jews on the Union side? If you know a little bit of American history, Jews. I don't know if they fought against each other, but there were Jews all over the place. So they made their shuls. So this is the first one. It's in Rhode Island. If you want to go see it, it's the first shul. It's written so as the first shul that is still around. Okay, because various other shuls were built too that are no longer around. This is the one that's still around, the first one.
What year was it built?
In the 1700s, mid 1700s, yeah. Okay, now I was telling you about the first congregation. The first congregation in America was the Spanish Portuguese Jews, especially Brazilian Jews that came from Brazil, the Portuguese Jews. Now they had their shul in various places. Now they were the first congregation. The reason that they're called the first congregation is because they were before anybody else. But they did not have one building at one spot all the time. So this is the last one. It's been reconstructed. It's in Manhattan, the Lower East Side, I think. Spanish Portuguese Jew shul. Old, but not as old as the one in Rhode Island, but it represents the oldest congregation. If you look at their history, they've been around the longest. Now, to give you an example of what the influence of the country where the Jews went, look at the Firenze synagogue in Italy. Look at the architecture and the style. You're seeing something completely different. Now, obviously, because you're seeing Italian influence. Not just Italian, but old Italian influence, whether it's the windows, whether it's the tiles, whether it's the cupola, or I guess that they call it in English, the dome on top. All of this is as a result, but it's okay. If you go to China today, I don't know if it's still around, you actually will see shuls, at least they had it in the past, in Kaifeng, where you see a Chinese hut. You know those Chinese roofs? Because that's China. You go to other countries, you see that style of that country. This is a famous synagogue in Poland, the Roma synagogue. You don't see the whole thing, but the Roma, this is talking about the mid-1500s. It's still around. It's in Krakow, an old shul that was preserved. Not all shuls were preserved. The Baal Shem Tov shul, for example, in the Ukraine was not preserved. They did something there today. They tried to renovate some of these older places, but this one was still preserved. This is another famous shul called the Altneu Synagogue, Altneu Shul in Prague, Czechoslovakia. One of the greatest attractions, even for non-Jews. This is associated, of course, related to the Maralmi Prague, to the Golem of Prague. So if you want to go see a Czech, old Jewish Czech history, one of the oldest, if not the oldest cemetery in all of Europe that is still standing in good condition is there too, not too far from there. So this is a very famous synagogue. They still have a minyan there, barely minyan of people every morning. There's not too many religious Jews there, but it's still used, and the goyim, non-Jews, also visit it. So it's almost like a museum. And did you know that Hitler, יימח שמו, did not want to destroy the Jewish community of Prague, at least not the buildings. He says after he's done with all the Jews, he wants to leave a relic. This is what the Jewish nation looked like. This is what their synagogues looked like. So he intentionally preserved the community, the buildings, the structures of that Jewish ghetto area. Beautiful area to visit. Again, it's a place that is visited by many goyim in the world too. Look at this one. This is in Yugoslavia. Another very interesting, large synagogue actually. Many of these shuls were around before Kristallnacht, before World War II, and many of them were burnt down to the ground. Some have been rebuilt, and some are no longer around. For those of you who want to see the largest synagogue in the world, this is the one. It's in Yerushalayim. It's called the Belz Synagogue. It sits about 5,000 people. Yeah, I wish I had some pictures of the inside. It's incredible. I was there inside, and you can't believe what you're seeing. It's not just... Oh, that's another story. But anyway, there's tremendous amount of money that went into it. Now, some of this architecture, you wonder why does it look like that? Some of it looks like the old Bell Synagogue in Europe. So if you were to go to Bell's, I don't think that shul, I think that shul is, I'm not sure how much of it is up yet. Well, in Bell's in the Ukraine. But today, it's a beautiful edifice. It's finished. It's incredibly inside too. Now, now pay close attention to the following pictures. Now you will see the difference between Sephardic and Ashkenaz. Originally, and even today, the Ashkenazim usually made the seating arrangement all facing towards the Aron HaKodesh. Over the years, the Aron HaKodesh, where the Sefer Torah became more and more important, because that is where the Sefer Torah are, that is where their permanent place is. So they began to make beautiful structures of this Aron HaKodesh. Gold, wood, carving with lions and animals. It's something incredible. You're going to see a picture soon. And the sitting arrangement, could you see the sitting arrangement? They're all facing the Aron HaKodesh. So even though here we're in a Sephardic shul, the sitting arrangement is the Ashkenaz way. We're facing the Aron HaKodesh because that is central. That is central. That is facing Yerushalayim. The idea behind the Ashkenaz mindset was that is their focus. Let's face there. It wasn't like a decision was made, but over the time, somehow they decided that was the best way to seat people facing the Aron HaKodesh. Here you have the inside of another shul called the Slovak synagogue, because in Slovakia, today Czechoslovakia is now one country. You have the Czech Republic, you have Slovakia. You have many beautiful shuls that I added this picture in for the most part because I wanted you to see the detail of the ceiling, the details of the walls, the columns, how much work, how much money went into all this. So much so that the Goyim today appreciate this. This is for them a great tourist attraction. I don't know if they charge money, but at least this brings them a lot of people, visitors, tourists. Beautiful detail that goes into everything. Now, what do you see in this? In what you see in this picture is a very important detail that you don't see in every shul. You see here on the top, you see a second floor, a balcony for the women, very similar to what existed in idea, in concept in the Bet HaMikdash. It's called the Ezrat Nashim because the women in Bet HaMikdash were in that area, but there's two ways to accommodate the two, men and women. We don't mix them because we don't want the men thinking about the women at the time they're supposed to be praying, right? So it's a holy place, so we want to separate the two, either by putting a mechitza, something to divide them, or by putting them on top. For those who complain that the women are not with the men, I tell them, listen, they got the best seats. They can see everything from the top. They can look at you, you can't look at them. What do you want? In reality, this is great. You got the best seat. So this is a very good arrangement if you can accommodate two stories that they are on top, and then you can accommodate more men in the bottom. Remember, the men are the ones who are obligated more so than the women to pray, at least all the prayers. So they are downstairs with the Sefer Torah and with the Chazan, and the women here are on top. This is an interesting picture that I found in the late 1800s of one of the shuls. There's some very interesting shuls in Israel. This is called Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai shul. But the reason why I thought this was nice is because, not because it's so old, but because here you could see, you don't see too much fancy furniture here, but you see the Sephardic rabbis here sitting in a circle. Because the Sephardic tradition, not in all shuls, but in many communities, is to sit around the teva, to sit around in a circle facing each other, facing the teva, not facing the Aron HaKodesh. You could see it a little bit better, perhaps, in this shul in Tehran. A very, very old picture of sitting on the floor. There's not even chairs here. Sitting around the small teva in the middle of the shul, praying. And here you have a better and clearer picture of another way of Sephardic sitting, where they're sitting around the teva. This is, I think, a shul in France. Beautiful shul. Again, the method here, the arrangement of the sitting is facing the teva, because this is the focal part of the shul. This is where the chazan is. This is what they will be reading the Torah from. So everybody's facing there. Now, even though there could be some facing from different directions, Nevertheless, the main congregation is all facing the teva, which is at the very center of the shul. This shul is a little bit empty, but you can see that just a little bit of the architecture. It's a Moroccan synagogue. So the motives, the various styles and architecture is influenced by Moroccan architecture. And in Spain, you would have had a combination of the two. You would have had some Moorish, which is Arab, and some Spanish. Here's an Israeli synagogue. Now, some shuls are modern. This one is some semi-modern. Not all the fancy schmancy, all the details are the architecture. And you have, of course, the benches facing the Aron HaKodesh. Nevertheless, it's a shul. Now, in building a shul, there's certain halachot. You have to know how to build it ideally. But not every place can be done ideally with all the little details. As long as, of course, the people get together and they pray to Hashem properly with the minyan, and they have the Sefer Torah, then they have sanctified the place. This is the amud that I was talking about before, where the Chazan Ashkenazi usually prays from, a lectern of sorts. He can pray from another spot, but this has become a traditional piece at an Ashkenaz synagogue. Amud, from where the Chazan prays from. For those of you who want to purchase Echal and Teva, this is a Tunisian style Echal and Teva. If you want to make your own shul, you can see the colorful design of the Tunisian style of both the Echal, where the Aron HaKodesh is, and the Teva, the box, as it is called, where the Chazan will be standing, where the reader of the Torah will be standing, and there might be some additional seats. Like by the Ashkenaz, they have additional seating for those who want to stick around there too. Beautiful style, beautiful design, according to the Tunisian style. This is the Teva or Bima, as it is called by Ashkenazim. It's called Bima. This is something that you can purchase, you can order. People make it slightly different. They can accommodate the Sidurim there. Just for you to get an idea of what it looks like, there's various styles that it could be made from. Everybody has it in the middle. The question is, however, who is in there? Is the Chazan there all the time like by Sfardim, or is it just for the Sefer Torah when it is brought out later to be read from? Okay, this is the Aron HaKodesh, a simple Aron HaKodesh. Now what you see on this Aron HaKodesh is a parochet. A parochet is like a curtain. The idea of parochet is taken from the Kodesh HaKodashim. They used to have a dividing line, a curtain between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies. So you don't have to have it. Some congregations don't have one at all. By Ashkenazim, by the way, they replaced the parochet with a white one on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and certain times of the year, with a white one, white representing atonement. And on Tisha B'Av, next week, they take it off. You won't see that here. That's their custom. So that's the parochet, the curtain covering up the box that we call the Aron HaKodesh. Now this is one of the most beautiful Aron HaKodesh in the world. It's the Aron HaKodesh of the Yeshiva of Ponevezh. There's an incredible story behind this. After World War II, there were many shuls, many places of worship that were abandoned. Jews have made aliyah. The communities are being emptied out. This particular, so a lot of Aron HaKodeshim were brought to Israel. This one came from Italy. This one is over 360, 370 years old. I don't even know how they brought it. But anyway, it is a beautiful, I wish you could get a closer look to all the detail, but you're welcome to go to Yeshiva Ponevezh and see the beautiful color and detail. It stands out, and this is one of the most famous Aron HaKodesh in all of Israel, perhaps in all the world. Now, there have been some beautiful, gorgeous Aron HaKodesh, but this is definitely one of the most famous ones, and the whole story behind how it was brought to Israel. This is a picture of a parochet. As you can see, the parochet, depending on who made it, also had various styles and colorations and designs. Sefer Torah, we have two kinds. We have the Ashkenaz Sefer Torah that is in poles, amudim, as they're called by Ashkenazim, atzei chaim, pillars of life. The Torah is the pillar of life. So you have a scroll, pretty much the same kind of scroll that Sfardim have. The handwriting, the script is of course a little bit different style, but they have what's called the amudim, the poles that hold the scroll, and they have emeil, Me'il is the cover, the cloth that covers it to protect it. That's the way the one you see on the right is a small sefer. They have small ones and they have larger ones. Small ones is usually for people who need to travel or, that they need it occasionally here and there. It doesn't weigh as much. But this is the one you see on the left is pretty much the average size. Some are heavier than others, but this is the style that the Ashkenaz use. This is how it looks when you open it up. What you see here is the hand made out of silver that is being used to read from the Torah, so we don't touch the parchment directly. This is an Ashkenaz Sefer Torah. As it is open, you can see the poles that hold the parchment in place. This is their style, a style that evolved not only in Ashkenaz country. So here's a mistake that people make. People think that there's a Sephardi and there's Ashkenazi Sefer. Not exactly. That's why I didn't put Sephardic and Ashkenazi. I put Sefer Torah with poles because in some Moroccan communities and in some of the Balkan countries, Balkan meaning Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Greece, even though they're Sephardim, they also used to have this too. Georgian Jews from the country of Georgia, some parts of it at least, they use this kind of Sefer Torah too. So over the ages, they adopted this style to hold the Sefer Torah. It has nothing to do with Sephardic and Ashkenazi. But for those of you who are more accustomed to seeing this is the Sephardic Sefer Torah, as some call it, but I call it a Sefer Torah in a box, because this is called a tik in Hebrew. There are some bemotot ve'amudim, poles, and there are some that are in a box. So many, or the majority of Sephardic shuls have the Sefer Torah in some sort of beautiful, ornate box. And when you open it up, you get something like this. This is a picture of the Yemenites when they first started coming to Israel 60 years ago. They brought with them, of course, everything, including Sifrei Torah. Their Sefer Torah is a little bit different. Some of them were even written on deer skin, which is very, very expensive. Deer skin, yeah. But they also use a box. The difference, however, between Yemenite, anybody know the difference between the Yemenites and the Sephardic Jews? You will know. What's the difference in the reading between the Sephardim and the Yemenites? How do you read from a Sefer Torah? The Sephardim take this box and they have it erect on the teva. The Yemenites take a box, but they put it on an angle similar to the Ashkenaz putting down their pole Sefer Torah. Nachon? So you see it's a combination of Ashkenaz Sephard. So that shows you that every community developed their own tradition. For whatever reason, this was more comfortable, this was ideal, but they also keep it in a box. And finally, what are we mourning next week? We're mourning for the Bet HaMikdash that has been destroyed, the first and the second, that we don't have a temple. This is the biggest shul, the most beautiful shul of all, that we're praying that Bezat Hashem, that very soon we should have the merit to see it rebuilt. Amen.